Again, this call is being recorded. If you don't want to be recorded, and we place our recording on a YouTube channel, so if you don't want to be recorded or you're not comfortable with it, time for you to drop off. Okay. So happy Friday and welcome to another session of Azure Power Lunch. Today we're going to talk about latest update regarding Azure Static Web Apps. So as usual, we do a quick level set. So what are uh, Azure Static Web Apps? Azure Static Web Apps are, and by the way, we talked about it, I think 15 months ago when they just were announced and were in public preview, and we, discussed what they are. So just quick refresher. Azure Static Web Apps are a PaaS service which allows you to host static web apps in Azure. Okay, what are static web apps? These are web apps that are built with framework like Vue, React, and the characteristics of these web apps are that there is no post back to the server. The communication happen with the server through API. So there are APIs that you may be running somewhere um, or hosting those APIs, and your application layer talks to those API using JavaScript or some of its abstraction or Blazor, which is based on .NET. So the point is there is no postback, and it takes advantage of your browser to host the presentation layer. They're very powerful. They're becoming very, very they used to be called single page application, things like that. And they are becoming really taking off. There are a number of frameworks. And here is a list of those Angular, there is React, Vue, and of course, Blazor, with which you can develop these apps. So, we, so the way it works in, second, so the way it works in with Azure Static Web Apps, you have your code that is stored in GitHub or in Azure DevOps, and you can build as you are making changes to the code. That code is pushed into Azure Static Web Apps, which is a PaaS service, and it provides not only hosting but also some very important features. For example, ability to set up managed service identities. So you can, if you want to access some secrets from resources like Key Vault, you can do that. At the same time, ability to access over private endpoints, so support for private link and private endpoint, and basically private endpoint. Um, and another thing is ability to do local debugging. So there is um, a SDK that is available that you can install on prem, and it allows you to debug these apps. And we will see that how, I mean, kind of how you can do debugging all the way through. So, and finally, it supports different authentication mechanism. Today, we don't may not have time to do that, but there is very detailed documentation on how you can support different, way to authenticate for your application, and probably we will cover it in a later iteration. So these are some of the things that Azure Static App allows you to do with the support of platform. And one other thing, you can host the APIs that power your web app using static web app, or you can host externally API, and we will see both of those things. So any questions at the moment? Joke. So by the way, this is gonna be a demo heavy session. We only have 24 minutes, so let's quickly start with the demo. So first demo I want to show you is kind of support for Azure DevOps, and with in addition to the GitHub. So first of all, let's create a Azure Static Web App. So let's go in here, and what we're gonna call it is, okay, I'm gonna name it Oh, and by the way, these are the two plans. So at that time, only free plan was available. Now there is another plan. And if you want to compare it, this is what it does. And this is important to note. First is free. I mean, you can have custom domains. You can do all that if you just want to play around with this stuff. With standard, you can bring your own function. There is more disk space. You can have a more staging environment, and at the same time you can have support for um, custom authentication, private endpoints, and managed identity. So these are some of the things that will come, and it's a $9 per app per month charge. Okay, so just we're gonna go with the free one for now, and we're gonna use other. Okay, and with that we're just gonna create the app. At the moment we're just creating the app, so it's gonna take a minute to create the app, and uh, then we go from there, go to the resource. This is the app that is created, and right now there is nothing going on in this app. There is um, no code hosted. So what we're going to do is we're going to connect it to a DevOps pipeline to push code into it so we can run it. So here we are. We are in I have set up a static web app in my ADO repository. And what I'm going to do is once you set that up, you just need to set up build, and it's going to ask you configure your build pipeline. Just start with the starter pipeline. It will throw some vanilla code, and let me just increase the font size a little bit so everybody can see it better. So this is the code that it generates. What we're going to do, I am going to copy some code, and you will be able to see it. It's not something uh, kind of out of this world, and I will explain it to you as well. So let's copy that and paste it here. So what it is doing is it's triggering based on the main branch, running it on an Ubuntu latest image, and look at that. This is the task. It is version 0 or first version of Azure Static Web App task, and it's deploying it. The one thing that we need, which will tell us where to deploy, is this deployment token. And what we're going to do, we're going to go to our web app, and we are going to say manage deployment token. We are going to copy it from here, and I am going to create a new variable. I'm going to name it deployment token. I hope the spellings are right. And I'm going to paste this value, keep it a secret. Okay, so we have now set deployment token, and we can do a save and run. At that moment, it's going to start deploying this, start creating this pipeline, and you can see the job has been queued, and now it's going to deploy it into the Azure Static Web Apps. Okay, everybody with me so far. Any questions? Okay, so while this is running, it's going to take a few minutes. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about static web app debugging and the VS Code support that is there. So we have first class support for VS Code in Azure uh, static web apps. So here is what it is. You have to have the extension, Azure Static Web App extension installed. So if you just type in here static, it should show up. So this is the extension. I have already installed that extension. So if I go on to my Azure node, you will see there is a static web app extension here. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open a existing project that I have. So let's go in here and go into samples. And this is the project that I want to play with it. I have stored it in Git, and we will play with this one. Okay. Yes, I trust the code. So this is a simple project that we have, and we have to do a few things before we start working with this stuff. So first thing first, what we need to do is we need to go to the folder. So here is my command prompt. I need to go, let me see if I can increase the font size here a little bit. Okay. And okay, so this is the directory. And there, let me just clear the screen. I need to run this command. That will install all the things that are needed for this static web app to run. While it is installing, just let's switch the context for a second. Let's go back and let's see. Okay, yes. Remember, we were deploying this from Azure DevOps. We run this. The job has completed. So let's go to this web app and try to browse. And here we go. Hello World from Azure Power Lunch. So this is the static web app that we hosted in ADO, and we are able to deploy it. Okay. So once again, let's switch the context back. I hope everybody is following. We just installed the static web app CLI. The next thing we want to do is um, install npm install, so it install all of the required stuff that is needed to run this project. Any questions? Okay. While this is doing that, um, let's take a look at the static web app node in here. So we are in Azure, and if you see here, let me just give it a second for it to refresh it. Okay. Come on. Okay, let's see if that is done. No, it's still going on. Okay, so it's refreshing the nodes. And for some reason, whenever it's demo, it takes more time. Okay, as you can see here, I can create a new static web app, or I can create an HTTP function. And we will see this experience in a second. Okay, so first of all, let's go back to our command prompt. Let's see if that is, so this is still going on. So let's let it finish, and then we will run a few other commands to um, do some other work in this. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to add a HTTP function here. Okay, and for the sake of it, I'm going to do a C# function. So I'm going to show this is a React app, and we are adding a C# API in this one. And I'm going to call it, say, hello. Okay. And I'm just going to keep the namespace the same, no change there, anonymous, and it's going to create the function. Okay. So it's basically adding a function project. If we go into the code, you will see API, and it's gonna put this C# project in this particular API. Okay, give it a second, and you will see that trigger show up here. Yes, say hello. So this is the C# code that has shown up here. What I'm gonna do just for testing, I'm gonna make a few changes to it. I'm gonna change this function, and I'm gonna put some custom code in it. Okay, just nothing's major, just making a few changes to this function. Okay, so I added this code, and then I'm gonna go into the source, which is the JS file, app.js, and I'm going to update the source so we can call the function. So just remember, we created a function, an API, and now we are going to call that function from this React web app. Okay, so we have to make a few updates to this one. And here we go. Just take a look, and it's very simple. There's nothing, I mean, no rocket science here. This is just some logging code, and this is where I'm calling the function. That's it. That's all I'm doing. Um, and with that, our both the modules are ready. So let's save it. Let's save this one. And so it is asking about, yes, restore the dependency. So it's gonna restore the .NET dependency and things like that. And once that is done, all of these squiggly lines will go away. Okay, so these are gone. So now our project is ready. So how are we gonna debug? We just need to go back here for a second and do an npm run build. Okay. So once that is built, then we will ready to run this thing. And just keep in mind, while this is doing this debugging work in this way, you have, when you are running the static web app in Azure, there are a lot of components behind the scene which are supporting it. When you are running it on-prem, in order to simulate that, you will have a host server, which will kind of just like an Azure host that is running. You will have, of course, your static web app, which will be running. You will have your API that will be running. And all of that communication will happen through that static web app host. Okay. So just bear with me. I know there are a lot of moving parts, it seems, but it's very simple once it's all said and done. Okay. So now we have our static web app. We have our function that is being called from the static web app. So what we're going to do now is do local debugging. So first, what we do is we come in here and we do npm start. Okay. That will start our front end. Okay. And, it will open in a browser localhost 3000. Okay. So that's running somewhere. It's a localhost 3000. We know that. That's where React runs. Okay. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we need to start our function app. So I'm going to go to API and I'm just going to say here, run start debugging. Okay, so what it's gonna do is now it's gonna start debugging the Azure Function project. Just think of it. There are two things happening. One, React app frontend that's running on port 3000, and here we are running the Azure Function C# project. Just think of it, C# project, and that's running. Okay, how we are gonna connect these two? Let it come up, and then we are we should be able to run it. A second. So the functions are starting and okay. So the function is locked in. I'm gonna do one thing. I'm just gonna put a breakpoint here just to prove that we are actually debugging. Okay. The last thing that we need to do is go into the directory of that function. So what we have to do is we have to go. So function there. React. Okay, we go in that directory and we run this command. So what is this? SWA, this is our to tell us to tell local SDK to start the SWA host. This is our front end and this is our back end. That's it. So let's run it. Okay, so now this is running. This is how we are gonna access our web application. As you can see here, using dev server from static content. For static content, this is our static content dev server, this is our API dev server, and this is the website. So basically, this is how Azure Web Apps is hosting our website. So I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go in here and paste this link. And as you can see, as soon as I hit, look, it stopped at this break point. Okay, what is happening? Yeah, it stopped at this breakpoint. Look, this breakpoint is stopped, and I'm just gonna say continue. And with that, let's go back here. Hello from React, and sorry, React is spelled wrong, but that doesn't matter. And C#. Okay, so this is how you debug. I know that there are quite a few steps, but they are very well documented. Just look at the links in the resource section or just the documentation. It is very simple to debug. So now you can do all your debugging on-prem, all the testing and everything, and get it ready before you deploy this app into Azure. Okay. So now, once that is done, let's say we debugged it, everything looks good. We are gonna say stop debugging, and now it's time to push this app from here to Azure. Okay, so once again, we go in here and let me just stop everything so we don't cause any issues. I'm gonna stop this. And as you can see, it shows you all the logs, what's being called, what's not being called. So all of it is available. Any questions in the meantime? Okay. If not, okay, so let's create so I'm just gonna pick this. Yes, commit all the changes. And I'm just gonna say enter. So it's gonna commit all the changes. It's gonna ask what is the enter a name of your new static web app. I'm gonna name this Ooh, and it's a React app. Yes, I'm just gonna say this is where app is the location of the build output. Yes, that's the build. And with that, so now what it is doing is it's gonna deploy this web app and it's gonna run it from there. So now that web app has created, it's gonna be deployed. And by the way, you can monitor the progress here. Okay. You can actually monitor the progress of your um, app here. This is shown here. So these are the actions and what is going on. All of that information you can see it here. Okay. So hopefully everybody is with me so far. Let's go in here. I think I already have an app that is deployed just for this to save time. This is the app I have already deployed here. And if you look at the functions, refresh it, do a couple of times. You see, this is the function that is already showing up here. Okay. And if we do an overview, browse, this shows up, this app shows up here. So this is how it's running, calling the function. Okay. Okay. Now, so this is for the free version. As you can see, for the free version, I'm using the free version here. Identity and private endpoints are both disabled. Okay, let's go to a web app that is not a free version. So this is gonna be a web app that is running the standard plan. As you can see, I can set up the managed identity. Its managed identity is set up. So it has a managed identity that it can use to connect. Um, you know, and you can give access to that managed identity and it can access resources. For example, Key Vault. Let's just want to access some secrets from Key Vault. It can do it, and private endpoint. So we're just gonna see a quick demo of private endpoint here. Let's go in here. We're gonna name it SWA-PE. We're gonna select a virtual network. That's the API VNet. And in that, we're gonna select client subnet. Yes, Let's do OK. So it's going to take a few minutes to create it. And once it is created, we should be able to access that website. So while it is doing it, I just want to emphasize a few things. Once again, the ability to do local debugging. So if you have functions and you have front end, you can do all of that on-prem, test it out, and then deploy. You know, all of that is now possible, and we saw it. I mean, though it was a very simple example, we have a React app and a C# function. So yes, if you want to do your front end in React and your APIs in C#, that's totally possible. Or I mean, or Node.js, that's possible as well. Okay, so that's that. We saw that there is first class support for deploying from VS Code. And with paid version, there is support for managed identity and private endpoint. Okay, so we have created the private endpoint. So let's try to access this app now over public IP. We cannot access it. As you can see, I'm trying to access it over public internet. I cannot access it because it's only accessible once it's over private endpoint um, through that. So let's see what is the private endpoint of that. Just we need to get that information just to see. Uh, so you see it has a private endpoint 10.0.255. So luckily I have a virtual machine that I have deployed in the same VNet where that private endpoint has been created. I can go in here and click on it, and you will see this web app come up. So uh, basically, now we are able to access the web app not from, not only from public IP, but if we want, okay, yes, here it is. Here is the web app. Okay, as you can see, this web app is now showing up. So this is just a mock-up of Azure Power Lunch site, but it's now showing up on the on through the private endpoint. Okay, we have 1 more minute. So any questions? Oh yeah. Oh, sorry. One thing I forgot. My mistake, folks. Oh, by the way, it is calling external APIs, as you can see. So just to set it up, so if you have this is your web app, and if you wanna call external APIs, here it is. Functions. You can go in here, and you can. I mean, this one is calling external API. You can go in and you can link to a function app. I have a function app in here in the subscription, and I can link it. Okay. So yeah, because I think it's a different region, that's why it's complaining. But you can link it to this one. I was able to make it work a few minutes ago with a different one, so maybe this one isn't working, but you can link it. But the point is, you can call external function. Just keep in mind only for standard static web apps. For free ones, you can only call functions that are part of that particular static web app. Okay. So with that, any other question? I know we are right on time. Okay. Thank you very much for joining. I hope everybody found the content useful, and hope to see everyone another Azure Power Lunch session next week. Have a wonderful day and stay safe, folks, and a wonderful weekend.